This is the best high protein pizza dough I've ever made. This pizza comes out to just 578 calories with 45 grams of protein, and the crust sounds like this. I promise you, if you make this for your friends or family without telling them it was high protein, they would never know. And in this video, I'm gonna teach you how to master this dough. Before we get started, Okay, long story short, I built a dough calculator. You can use it to pick a 1 to 2 hour, same day, or cold ferment dough. You can pick how many dough balls you want. You can also pick what size you want the pizza to be. And all the instructions are built right into the calculator. The link for the calculator is down below. Before we get into the rise profiles, let's cover the part that's the same for all three. Combine all your dry ingredients and give them a quick whisk. One quick note while we're looking at the ingredients, I use instant yeast for all these recipes. I recommend the individual yeast packets. Then slowly pour in the water over about 10 to 15 seconds while mixing. I use a KitchenAid on the lowest setting for about 3 to 5 minutes. You don't want to overmix this dough. If you're mixing by hand or using a food processor, I have the mixing times for each built right into the calculator, as those times will vary. Once the dough starts coming together and is mostly smooth, you're good to go. It could still be a little shaggy at this point. Before we get into the rise profiles, there's one more thing I want to mention. This dough is very resilient and forgiving. The main thing you need to focus on is keeping it from drying out. I use airtight containers whenever possible or a bowl tightly covered with plastic wrap. For longer rises, I like to lightly spray the inside of the lid or plastic wrap with water to help maintain humidity. The reason I do this is because we're not coating the dough in oil to prevent it from drying out. You can absolutely use oil if you want to. I just didn't want to add extra calories that didn't need to be there. What we're really trying to do is introduce humidity into the container while having as little water physically touching the dough as possible. And if your dough does end up drying out a little, don't worry. I'll show you exactly what to do later in the video. My calculator has 3 different dough options. I have a cold ferment, a same day, and a 1 to 2 hour dough. Let's start with my favorite of the 3, the cold ferment. After you make your dough, keep it covered in an airtight container and let it rise at room temperature for about 1 to 1.5 hours, as close to 70 degrees as possible. For the cold ferment, you have 2 options. For option A, after the initial 1 to 1.5 hour room temperature rise, divide the dough into dough balls. Don't worry about balling the dough just yet. I'll teach you exactly how I do that later in the video. Place the dough balls into airtight containers, refrigerate them, and then pull them out to room temperature at least 4 hours before baking. Option B is my preferred method. After the initial 1 to 1.5 hour room temperature rise, degas the dough and place it into the refrigerator as a bulk ferment. Then, at least 5 hours before baking, divide and ball the dough and leave it at room temperature until ready to use. No matter which option you choose, I strongly recommend at least 30 hours in the fridge. My personal sweet spot has been around 72 hours. Next up is the same day dough. This is my convenience option. Unlike the cold ferment, this dough stays at room temperature the entire time. For the same day dough, you have 2 options. You can divide and ball the dough right away and let it rise until ready to use, or for the best results, leave it as a bulk ferment and ball it about 3 to 4 hours before you want to make pizza. This is the option I use most often when I'm busy. I can make the dough in the morning, go about my day, ball it up later, and have pizza ready that evening. And if you don't end up using it or don't use all of it, you can always degas it, reball it, or leave it as a bulk ferment and move it into the fridge. At that point, you've basically started a cold ferment. Last up is the 1 to 2 hour dough. This is my fastest option. For the 1 to 2 hour dough, divide and ball the dough right away. Place the dough balls into airtight containers and let them rise at room temperature until ready to use. That's it. A little pro tip. If you want the best same day dough, leave this dough as a bulk ferment at room temperature and ball it about 1 to 2 hours before baking. The increased yeast in this recipe will develop more flavor than the same day dough. The difference is that you don't really want to push this recipe past a day. Now that you know the 3 different rise profiles, let's quickly go over how I ball the dough. Take the dough and gently degas it. Flatten it slightly, fold the edges in, and fold the dough over itself a few times just like this until it starts forming a ball. Pinch the seams close and hold it for a few seconds. This dough doesn't always hold its shape quite as easily as traditional pizza dough, so don't rush this part. Then use the countertop rolling method to tighten the dough ball until the surface becomes smooth. Try not to overwork it. Less touching is usually better here. Once your dough ball is smooth, place it into a very lightly greased container. I usually do one quick spray of oil and wipe it around with a paper towel. You don't need much, then cover it and make sure it's airtight. Now let's turn this dough into pizza. I like to roll the dough in King Arthur keto wheat baking flour. It has 80 calories and 12 grams of protein per serving and works really well for stretching. In reality, only about 4 to 5 grams usually ends up sticking to the pizza. I calculate that flour into the macros you'll see from me, but if you don't have it, regular bread flour or all-purpose flour will work just fine. Start by pushing the air from the center of the dough outward towards the crust. This dough usually takes a little more pressure than a traditional pizza dough, so don't be afraid to really press into it. Once you've formed your crust, lift the dough onto the backs of your hands and let gravity do most of the work. Take your time and watch for thin spots. For the peel, I just use a pinch of semolina flour and a pinch of the keto flour. Once your dough is on the peel, add your toppings in the order you're seeing on screen. Before launching, give the peel a quick shake test to make sure the pizza is moving freely. And if your pizza ended up a little smaller than you wanted, you can carefully stretch it a little larger even after the toppings are on, just like this. When you're ready to launch, place the front edge of the peel near the back of your pizza steel or stone. Then use a quick forward and back motion to let the pizza slide off the peel and onto the cooking surface. Confidence helps here. A hesitant launch is usually worse than a confident one. I highly recommend using a pizza steel if possible, but a pizza stone will still work great. Bake on the middle to upper rack of a fully preheated oven as hot as it will go. Most ovens reach about 500 to 550 degrees. Most pizzas will be done in about 5 to 6 minutes. If it needs a little more color, you can just broil it. I also like rotating the pizza halfway through the cook to help it brown evenly. One last quick tip before we wrap up: if your dough does end up drying out a little, don't panic. Most of the time, you can simply flip it over and let the bottom side rehydrate the surface. You can also lightly spray the dough itself with water and give it some time to rehydrate. Or if you're still in the fermentation stage, you can flip it over, degas it, and reball it. This dough is surprisingly forgiving, so don't assume it's ruined. If your dough gets super airy and overproofed like this, don't worry. An overproofed dough ball is not ruined. If this dough gets too puffy or difficult to work with, simply degas it and reball it. Then give it a little time to relax again. I've done this countless times with this dough. In fact, some of my cold fermented dough has been degassed and reballed multiple times before finally becoming a pizza. If your dough sat out a little longer than planned and you want pizza right now, just push the air out of the entire dough ball, including the crust, and just turn it into a thin crust pizza like this. If there's one tip I could give you about making pizzas, it's to get it into the oven no matter what. If it's looking a little bit ugly on the peel, you didn't stretch it right, it's just not looking the way you expected, get it in the oven. You will be shocked at what comes out. The oven works magic. I have thrown some truly horrendous looking pizzas inside the oven and they came out looking great. Don't baby the process, don't stress over perfection. Just make pizza. This is the pizza from the beginning of the video. 578 calories, 45 grams of protein. If you made it this far, you now know how to have high protein pizza dough whenever you need it. If you found this helpful, my dough calculator is linked down below. Go make some pizza.